Hey guys, welcome back to Honey in the Rock, episode 57. I'm Sophie, and this is Hillary.
Hey!
Thank you for coming on
For
today.
sure.
So, Hillary has such a cool God story. Literally, God saving her life.
Yeah.
Most, literally. And so I'm just excited for you guys to hear her story, how God used her, and how, her and her two little baby girls are this miracle.
Yep, for sure.
Thank you for coming.
No, thanks for having me.
Finding time. You're just mom, girls, busy life.
Gets a little busy. Yeah, absolutely.
So, you can tell me a little about yourself.
Yeah.
And then we'll go into your birth story.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Hillary Dobson. I live here in Greenville. I was born and raised in the upstate. I've been married to my husband, Jeff, for going on, you kind of lose count here, but I want to say about 15 years now. And we have two girls. My oldest daughter, her name is Livian, and she is 11. And then Merritt, who we'll be talking a little bit about today, is 6 years old. I'm working banking, also do a little monogramming and embroidery on the side.
So cute.
For a little bit of a creative outlet. And believe it or not, Sophie and I are actually related. We're cousins through marriage and go to church together. So just a little bit of background.
Her wedding.
Yes, she was also the flower girl in my wedding. And if I had thought about it, I would have brought embarrassing pictures or cute pictures of her as a little baby.
I forgot about that. And then you were saying how many years? I was like, yeah, that sounds right, because I was probably 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think you were
17.
You were 2 at our wedding. So, yeah, and then Jeremy and Casey.
Yep, I still have the little dress I wore.
I know it.
That little green bow. That's so fun. Yes, and then like my mom and her husband are cousins, so we're like cousins by marriage. You probably can't tell by the way we look. We don't look like.
No. You see our mom and you think we're related on the other side.
Yes. And so it really is fun. And then it's now fun, like after you guys will hear Merritt's story, it's fun to get to see Merritt growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, and then she was in my soccer camp this summer. I was like one of my kids.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just so sweet to like see the miracle that she is.
Mm-hmm.
And just to get to like love on her, but then just watch her grow and smile. And it's just so cool. It's a gift of life. So
yeah, she's a little warrior. That is for sure.
She is. So you can just go right into it, share what you're comfortable with that story.
Yeah, and I will be, and I told Sophie when we started, this is the first time that I have ever shared this story publicly, so I promise I'll try and hold it together.
Yes,
first off, kind of when you have, traumatic events in your life, I've talked to people about this, and you have this, we call it like an elevator pitch. Like when somebody asks you about it, you have a 3 or 4 minute kind of, you're almost numb to it type of story that you give. And sometimes you just think that, and I'll just from experience, I've learned when I do go into the details, I mean, it is deep, and there is a huge spiritual complex and event that happened with all of this. And I think sometimes people get maybe a little bit nervous or don't know what to do with it. Especially if they are not a believer or, or have ever been exposed to that. It makes them a little uneasy. So I've been a little guarded personally, but I also feel like in the past couple of years, I've been pushed a little bit and led. And when thankfully Sophie asked me to be on this podcast, if you ask her how long I've put this off, I would say probably about since she started the podcast. Almost a year. I would say like 9 or 10 months, but it's a story that needs to be told. And I think the more ears that can hear, just not so much what the other side looks like, but just that there's still miracles happening every day, and you don't know how far your ripples go, and you don't know who you affect with what. I mean, we still hear all the time of people, I will run into people that I don't even know. I mean, we have zero contact, and it's either been something that's been studied through a medical training or a class that they've been through. They go, oh my gosh, that was you. Mm-hmm. Or I'll run into people that I haven't seen in years, and they're like, oh my God, you're just up and about. And this was an event that happened 6 years ago. And I'm like, yes, we were up and about actually pretty quick. But this all was, 6 years ago. I'll kind of rewind just a little bit prior to the event because it is important. Probably about, 3 weeks before I went into labor with Merritt. I was at my parents' house. My parents live at the lake in Anderson, and it was around a little bit before the 4th of July. I also had a dear friend who was pregnant at the same time as me, and I had some, I don't want to even just call them nightmares, but really, really strong, like kind of intuition moments where I felt like something wasn't right, something was going to happen. I voiced them to my medical team, and they deal with pregnant women every day. Like, we're a little loopy.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of continued to tell me, Hillary, you're just panicking a little bit. It's second baby. You know what's coming. You know what the process is.
Right.
I think you're just a little freaked out.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just agreed. A couple days later, I received a text message that the dear friend that was also pregnant had experienced, and it was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase potentially an AFE and then something called DIC.
Yeah.
And AFE stands for amniotic fluid embolism. DIC is a word about that long. I have absolutely no idea what it stands for. But if you Google it, just bear with yourself while you try and read the word.
Yeah.
But it is an extremely traumatic birth experience. Thankfully, she is totally fine. Her baby is also fine. But it's very, very rare. An amniotic fluid embolus usually only happens in about 1 in 40,000 women, and the mortality rate is pretty high. And so that was just another one of those things that just kind of shocked me that I'd heard that this happened to her. Even though she was okay, it's still a little bit earth-shattering. And I continued to panic. And I continued to have, I'm not one to have a panic attack, but I remember when we were at the lake that weekend, waking up and just having a full-blown panic attack. Something's going to happen. Like, I just feel like this is going to be different. And I went to that one of my same doctors who, I love him dearly. Yeah. And he looked at me and was like, Hillary, lightning doesn't strike twice. Like, you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to worry about this happening to you. Right. Pretty much my friend took care of the statistic for me. Jeff and I go to the doctor for Merritt. I was 39 and 5, so 39 weeks, 5 days. She was a big baby. For those of you who saw me during that time, my stomach was literally huge. And I'm about 5'2". So, there's only so many places that she can go. So she went out. But she was about a 9-pound baby. She was big. Mm-hmm. But we went to the doctor that morning, and I let him know, I'm just uncomfortable. I'm still having these worries. And they do this little procedure. I won't go into that. They'll do this little procedure to kind of help get you started. Yeah. And Merritt really didn't tolerate it. So we decided that evening that I would go in for an induction, which is not what I had with Livian, my first child, not that experience. Mm-hmm. And so my mom, who is over 40 years, she's a nurse, she's a mom baby, but takes care of baby, and has seen, many things in her career. So she is always my right hand. So just like with Livian, it was Jeff and my mom, and that's how it was going to be with Merritt. And we had kind of already agreed, because I just had such a strong feeling that something wasn't going to be the same, that my mom would actually scrub in for Merritt's birth, because she could talk to me in terms that I needed to know. I'm one of those people, if you can't tell, I'm a little bit of a talker. I need someone talking to me and giving me what's going on, what's happening now, and not the doctor. Right. I don't need that lingo. I need my mom telling me what's going on. So we had kind of already prefaced, and Jeff had graciously agreed, that's a hard pill to swallow, not to be in there when that's going on. But I just really needed my mom to be able to talk to me, because I was just so nervous about it. Right. So fast forward, we go in, and I remember just having this feeling wash over me walking into Prisma, that just when we come out of this, we are not going to be the same. And I didn't know if it was going to be because we were having a second child, whether I was just really overreacting. So everything went pretty smooth that night. They started my induction. We kind of hung out all night, got an epidural, thank the Lord for modern medicine. Yeah. Kudos to the mamas that can do it without it. It's not the cards for me. I felt all I had needed to feel. So we were good. And looking, kind of forward, thank goodness I had that epidural, but it was already in there. But probably around, I want to say like 6 o'clock that morning, things started kind of really getting cranked up. If you work in the medical field or if you've ever had a baby, you know, usually around that like 6:45 to 7:15, 7:30 is shift change in a hospital. So your night people are going home, your morning people are coming on, and they kind of make their rounds and they're chatting and getting to know their new patients. And it's just this whole thing. Thankfully, through the night, I had a very good friend who was an OB nurse. Her name is Tammy, and was just an absolute godsend to me, was with me when I got my epidural. And when we get a little bit more into the story, she actually came back when all of this went down. Left her shopping cart in Publix, came back.
Sweet.
So we were switching over. 2 girls I had never met. I actually had 2 nurses that day. Their names are Megan and Kaylee. And, you know, that was my first time meeting them. Tammy was going over everything with them. And about the time that shift change kind of happened and was over, they decided, okay, time to break your water. Yep. Which, you know, that anybody's had a baby, like when your water breaks, it's kind of game on. Yep. And so they broke my water, and my mom was like, all right, if this is any indication of last time, I went very fast after I had my water broken. She's like, I'm going to get coffee. Yep. So she went downstairs to, you know, fill her cup up to kind of get ready for the next couple of hours. And in that short amount of time is when everything kind of went south. So after my water broke, I started feeling a little lightheaded, a little, really, quite honestly, when you think of being anxious, heavy breathing, feeling like you can't get oxygen in and out, you kind of feel like hyperventilating, is the feeling that you get. And I just kept saying, God, I'm warm. Like, I mean, I literally felt like my ears were red and like I felt hot. And so one of the nurse, Megan, she came in and kind of started messing around with Merritt's heart monitor, got me to go on my side. I had kind of been through this before. Livy got a little finicky with her heart rate at one point in time. So I wasn't panicking at that point. Right. I just felt off. Merritt was acting a little wild, which if you've ever met Merritt, she's a little wild. So just kind of in accordance with her personality. And then I remember Megan, they have these little walkie-talkies calling and saying, I need backup in whatever room we were in. When she called that, I thought, that's odd. And then the next thing I know, she goes, I said I need backup. And I thought, okay, something's going down. So then I really started to panic. At this point, my mom's not in the room, so I don't have my right hand to be able to ask. Jeff, you know, is just trying to be as supportive as he can, standing beside me, like, what do you need? What can I do? You know, just like, you know, it's like trying to put a fire out.
Yeah, but he also doesn't know what's happening.
He has no idea what's going on. And then he's not trying to panic. All I remember is they gave me the shot. I can't remember if they gave it to me in my arm. I feel like they did, because I remember thinking, God, I'm numb. Why don't you put it in my leg? And that was to stop my labor. My OB came running in and she said, all right, she said, Merritt's not tolerating this. Her heart tones are down. You have to have a C-section. And I can remember in that moment going, I can't do this. Like, I can't. There's no way. She just kept looking at me and going, you're okay. And I was like, I'm having a panic attack. I'm having a panic attack. They put an oxygen mask on me. And I remember Jeff standing in the doorway, and they wasted no time. I mean, it was quick. I want to say that they decided around 7:37. I have my medical record, so I've looked at timestamps. And I want to say it was around 7:37 that they decided, all right, we got to get the baby out. And so my room is actually the closest room in that whole unit to the OR doors. So it's just literally like across the hall. And so the last thing I remember is going through that door frame. And I remember Jeff looking at me going, you're going to be okay. I love you. Your mom's coming. And I remember him saying that, but he even talks about it. He's like, when I said that to you, I felt like you weren't there. Like, I felt like your eyes were open, but like you weren't registering. And when we look back at the timestamps, that's also about the time that we think that my heart stopped. So we roll through the doors, we get in there. I do not remember going through the doors. I do remember being in the OR. I don't remember what it looked like or anything. And I remember somebody saying, come on, Hillary, you got to help us. Because I mean, y'all, there's a 9-pound baby and then me trying to get over to a table. Because usually, you know, you kind of push up and help them. And there was no help. I wasn't there at that point. And so they immediately started working on me. From what I've read, what I've been told, thankfully, I've had Megan, I've had Kaylee, I've had my OB kind of walk me through what it looked like for them and what happened. And one of the things that they first do is called a sternum rub. And if you've ever seen that, it just looks painful. But they take their knuckles as hard as they can to try and stimulate you because they thought that I'd passed out.
Right.
Come to find out, I was completely, I don't know if I was necessarily flatlined at that point, but I was not there. And so when that happens, with baby in, you cannot shock somebody. No. You cannot put paddles on and you can't shock if a baby is in you. So remember, 7:37 is when they decided to C-section me. Merritt was born at 7:44.
Goodness gracious.
So there was not, that like very fast acting. Merritt got cut out. I was shocked to bring my heart back online. I had continuous CPR for about an hour and a half is what it looked like. Chest compression, CPR, fully intubated. So, tube down your throat, the whole gamut. So the AFE is what caused that. It is when, not to try and get too medical or technical, but they don't really know what causes it, but think of it as your body goes almost into an anaphylaxis type shock.
Right.
Because everybody gets a little bit of amniotic fluid in their bloodstream when your water breaks, but my body reacted to it like it was something I was highly allergic to. Okay. And so your body just, you just start, you can't breathe and you start shutting down. So that's kind of what had been happening. And there's a second piece to it, which is the DIC, which don't Google. And it is where even if you can survive and get your body back online from the AFE piece, the DIC piece is second. And this happened after Merritt was taken. Okay. And that is where you literally just bleed out.
Right.
Think of hemorrhaging times 100. Right. It's your body cannot retain the blood. So they gave me, I believe when I looked, it was like 1.72 times my blood volume. So think a whole body of blood plus a whole nother 3/4 of somebody's body of blood before my body really started taking.
Right.
And then when that happened, come to find out later, I'd thrown some massive blood clots when that happened. So I had a blood clot in my inferior vena cava, and I had a blood clot, I want to say somewhere around my kidney. And they were what they call fluid blood clots. So you don't ever really know if they're going to move. And it was just, that's a whole nother thing. All while that's happening, Merritt gets cut out. They give babies APGAR scores. She was an APGAR of a 1, which is, you don't want to be a 1. She was not breathing, blue, not what you want your baby to be when she comes out. Thankfully, because of that NICU team, she bounced back pretty quick. I want to say she was like a 1, a 5, and a 7, which is unheard of. Right. So her kind of protocol was she was immediately intubated, and then she was put on something called cooling protocol. So they literally take her body temperature as cold as they can, and that's for 3 days. So thinking about your baby being cold for that long is pretty horrific. However, it completely saved her brain, and it saved her organs, and it saved her little body, and it let her little body heal, and it worked. Merritt somehow, you want to talk about some spiritual intervening, besides being on a vent, being multiple EEGs, EKGs, brain, heart, she is perfect.
She is.
And when we left that hospital 13 days later was perfect then. It wasn't a hill that had to be climbed. She was this miracle baby that laid, this big 9-pound baby laying in NICU. And I'm not saying that she wasn't super sick. Merritt was very, very sick. But her bounce back, which if you know Merritt, she just, that's how she treats life though anyway. She bounces back very quickly from things. Was wild. Right. So, you've got here, and then poor Jeff and my mom, you have a wife who is,
heart stop,
dying.
Right.
And then you have a baby who tried to,
Right.
And so trying to bounce, back in between those things. And thankfully, that NICU team at Prisma just told him, they were like, we've got her, talking about Merritt.
Yeah.
You need to go be with your wife.
Yeah.
And so they took her, worked on her. I was in OR for about an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours in that time. Mm-hmm. There was a huge intervening that happened on Wednesdays, because that's when Merritt was born. She was born on a Wednesday. On Wednesday mornings, every anesthesiologist at Prisma has a meeting. The students, nurse anesthetist, anesthesiologist have a meeting. So it was all hands on deck. That meeting was happening while I was crashing. Yep. So there was a code, they call a code if somebody codes. There was a code that was called, and I literally had everything Prisma had to offer just because of how this all lined up. Right. And then how I told you about my friend Tammy. She was actually, I want to say she was in Publix. She was trying to get her groceries before she went home. Yeah. She abandoned her cart, came back and scrubbed in. Yeah. And was in there. She was actually the first voice I heard when I woke up. Wow. And it was her getting onto somebody because she didn't want me moved. I can distinctively remember, oh my gosh, did I pass out? Yeah. That's kind of what I thought happened. Yeah. So I had this entire team that was working on me, and I really think it took all of them. They even talk about it, and they're like, they had to paddle me twice to get me back a couple times. At one point in time, you have to have multiple IVs when you're trying to get blood into somebody. Right. And there was this guy who was a student. He was actually a battlefield nurse. So he was a military veteran that was going through school to be a nurse anesthetist. And he was actually the first one to be able to get something going in one of my veins. Oh, wow. And so they said when that happened, it was like everybody got silent. And it was like everybody just made eye contact. And it was just almost this silent dance. Right. They all moved, gave him what he needed so that they could all work in tandem to get as much blood going to my body. So we get through that. The news that Jeff and my mom got was not great. They had already prepped them that this is something you usually don't survive. It's kind of the we're doing everything we can conversation. In this time frame, I believe y'all were at the beach.
We were. I know exactly where I was.
Yeah, y'all were at the beach, and I want to say maybe my sister-in-law, I can't remember who reached out to your mom or maybe Courtney. Yep. And just said, this is going on. It was just kind of like one of those, we need everybody to pray. Right. We need everybody to get on it. We had not been visiting Mountain Creek Baptist Church long.
It had just been a little bit of time.
Just a couple of months. But Bert, who is our pastor, I don't even remember where he was.
We called, from what I remember, it was 6 years ago. But I remember we were outside of this beach house. My mom's whole side of the family was there. We were all there. And my mom and Courtney, I just feel like somebody was crying, saying something. And then we were just all outside praying. Yeah. For you and Merritt. And then I was 11, so I don't remember much. But I do remember my mom called Bert. And I feel like he was at his house or somewhere, and he just picked it up. And it was by the time my mom finished saying what's happening, he was like, I'm in my car. Tell me where the room is. Yeah. Or something like that. So it was quick, but I think my mom called him.
Yeah, I think that's how he got the message of what had happened. And so I remember, and what they don't tell you is when you code, they tape your eyes. Okay. And then they had dosed me with a paralytic, so I couldn't move. Right. And I mean, for good reason. You don't want, if somebody does wake up, I think they had assumed I was in a coma. I wasn't in the world, which we'll get to that in a little bit. I wasn't in the world. Came back, but wasn't in the world for a portion of time. But when I did come back, I remember the first person I heard was Tammy, and I thought, she left. Yeah. And it's so weird because when I hear of how traumatic everything was that happened and how bad of shape I was in and Merritt was in, I never was like, there was no panic. There was no, where am I? What's going on? What's happening? Where's Merritt? Like, there was none of that. None of those, because I'm fully awake at this point. Yeah. I can't move. And I can't imagine if I had been panicked and couldn't move, I would have thought I was like paralyzed or something. I had tubes down my throat, I had tubes coming out of my neck. But it was just like, none of it dawned on me. No. The only time that I really felt pain in those next few hours, where they were doing CT scans, because they thought I'd thrown like a pulmonary embolism to my like lungs or something, which is horrible to do when you have a baby. So we're trying to narrow down what happened. And that's when they found the clots. But during all that, I can hear what they're all saying. And I can hear them talking about me, and I can hear them talking about Merritt. So you would think you would be completely panicked. No, like it was like it was going in one ear and out the other. Like it was just like, they're not talking about me. Like I don't know what they're talking about. And so it wasn't until that second CT that Tammy was still with me that I had what they call it a subclavian port, and I still have scars from it, but there's these two lines essentially that go down into your subclavian for them to be able to dose medicine, pull blood without having to stick you a bunch of times, which is horrendous as that looked. I'm really thankful that I had it, but someone like snagged it or like pulled, and I jerked back against them, and that's when they were like, wait a minute, she moved. And I just remember somebody like very gently taking tape off of my eyes, and my eyes shot open. And that's kind of when I was explained kind of what had happened to me. There's a whole like flip side to this about what was my husband, my family, my husband's, I mean, like they're all there, was experiencing. But I mean, you know, I can't imagine. Like I knew where I was, and I mean, I might as well have been like laying on a beach, quite honestly. But they were all anxious, traumatized. I mean,
especially that's Jeff and your mom, where they were.
Yes, too. And being told, you know, though we're doing all we can do. So what is weird when you look at the timestamps from when they notified, when all that was happening, Bert was praying, and he had just said Deuteronomy 31:8, and that's when they said that somebody busted through the doors of the chapel and said, "You're not going to believe it, she's awake." And I mean, it was just this, you know, everybody was like, "What? Like she's awake?" And so that is when like my mom, my dad, Jeff, like I can remember them all coming in there. And we just have a lot of like people that I feel like in times of like things that are very traumatic, there are people that just have like fight or flight responses. And we learned how many people that were in our life that had a fight response. We also have other good friends that my mom has worked with for years. Their names are Sin and Anne Marie. They're both doctors. And I can remember laying there, and I was kind of in and out of things. We're trying to figure out if I can move muscles. And I can remember Sin talking so loud and thinking, oh my gosh, why is he talking so loud at me? I can hear everything that he's saying, but they don't know, kind of I'm in and out. They don't know if I can move. I can remember him asking me to push, asking me to squeeze, asking me to push my feet. I can remember him telling me and asking me to blink my eyes. And I think they're trying to see if, like, you know, cognitively, if I was just my eyes open or if I'm there. And so as the paralytic wore off, I was able to do more, and it was pretty rapid. But you know, at that time I can't talk. I can't do anything. So just that whole experience was it was traumatic. It was something, quite honestly, that I wasn't supposed to survive. Statistically, I should not be here. But the more important part is what happened when I wasn't here. And it's kind of the part, I'm not going to cry.
I'm chills.
But it's the part that is very close to my heart. And I'll get it together.
You're good. While you're so so from my point of view, I just remember the praying, and then I remember Jeff's part. So it really is cool to hear what you were experiencing. It's now honestly not peaceful, it's not the right word, but how relaxed you were is such a blessing. And already in the story, before you even share this part, is so many God things. How were you in the room that was closest to the OR? How were you here? It's just the Wednesday thing, all the little things that were lined up already. how Mary had to, what she went through and how
Yeah.
she's still here. People could say, "Oh yeah, that was good luck," or "That was a coincidence."
Yeah, or like medical
Whatever,
staff.
yes,
And I mean,
yes. And they're warriors and awesome.
yeah.
But if you look at the bigger picture, it's God.
Yeah.
You weren't in that room on accident. It wasn't a Wednesday on accident.
Mhm.
It wasn't this on accident. Like, things weren't on accident. Your
Yeah.
mom's not a nurse on accident. So it's just,
Yeah.
to look at it through the God lens, it's like, whoa. Look at it that way. So.
I mean, he definitely kind of wove this story. That is for sure. I don't think that he was giving me, I don't necessarily think he was giving me the anxiety, because I don't think God gives you anxiety.
Right.
But I think that was just my human response to, I'm telling you.
Yes.
This is going to happen. I don't think it was a punishment by any means. I just think that's what our story is.
Yeah.
And I do think that God gives, some of his toughest battles, I would like to think, to some of his strongest warriors. Like he gave it to Merritt.
Yeah.
I've often thought like I'm not really deserving of the story, or things that we've talked about several different times. But yeah, while I wasn't there, now that I pulled myself together, while I was not there, there was definitely a spiritual side to this. Yeah. And I think it's why I was never worried. Yeah. I was never stressed. Mm-hmm. I was never, where is my baby? What's going, like, right. I never, looking back, had any type of anxiety. Like, it was completely removed from the equation. Right. But, I felt like I was sitting on a beach. So my friends know I have some of my favorite places are any type of ocean. Yep. And then I love a good trip to TJ Maxx. Like those are my favorite things.
Me too.
And of course, being with friends and family, but just like the funny things are, I love being on a beach. I love the day where it's, we call it no temperature. Yep. Like you're not hot, you're not cold, the sun's shining. Yep. And that's where I felt like I was. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was just sitting on the beach. And it was the experience you have if you've had your sunglasses on for a long time and you take your sunglasses off and your eyes kind of get blown out and then everything refocuses. Yeah. That's exactly what it was. Mm. But there were people there waiting on me. Yeah. And two of them, it is my grandfather who just passed away recently. Yeah. It's his mom and dad. Mm-hmm. They were there. It was my Nana and Papa. They were in my life until I was about 16. And then my great grandmother died the day after Jeff and I got engaged. So I was 21 and they were there and they were like, you think about your best memory of somebody. So not them 97, 98, 99 years old, not when they were, I mean, granted they were older, but they were my great grandparents. Right. But like when I imagine my Nana cooked all the time. And I think about like, texture things with her, like she had the softest paper towels in the world. Yes. Like I still can't even find those to this day. Yeah. You ate off of a Dixie plate. It didn't matter if you had just eaten. If you came to your house, you were eating again, and you ate off of a Dixie plate and you had the softest napkin ever. And so I just imagine her in that kitchen, sitting at that big table. They lived in this precious mill house in Pendleton. And then when I think about my papa, I think about him like picking tomatoes. He had all these tomato plants. Yeah. And I think about him, going out there with us and picking tomatoes or sitting, out on the carport when we would go to visit them. Just like the best versions of them is how I saw them. Yep. And then I saw my mom's mom, who was my mama, my great grandmother. Yep. And there again, best memories of her. Yep. She was always down to shop. She loved costume jewelry. I have all of her jewelry. And so it was her decked out on, like what I would think about her decked out on Christmas Eve, big, bouffant hair, had her house to the nines. That's just how I saw her. And the one that's the real kicker is I saw my dad's dad. And my dad's dad, I have never met. Oh, wow. He died when my dad was young. Oh, wow. But I've seen pictures of him. He looks like my dad. And when I saw him, I was like, oh man, I know exactly who that is. Right. He looks like my dad. He's just like a big guy. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you have the biggest hands I've ever seen. Like his hands were huge and he had these full rosy cheeks like that. And I saw him just that way. And so they were all there. Yeah. They were all there waiting on me. I I have tried to figure out if they spoke to me, if they said something to me, did God speak to me? And I don't think, I think they did.
Yeah.
I just think that it's not something I brought back.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to how I felt on the other side.
Right.
I think it speaks to the fact that like we were both okay and completely taken care of. I think it speaks to the doctors, the nurses, that we interacted with. And I mean, I think we blew a few people's minds with the fact that I survived. My anesthesiologist, his name was Dr. Pruitt. And I have not seen him since that day. I would love to see him.
Yeah.
But I can remember him, I think he had already worked like over 24 hours and then just like wouldn't leave.
Yeah.
And he just continued to like come and check. And I don't think anybody had communicated to him that I had woken up. So I think I surprised him. I remember him standing in the door and I just waved at him and he was like, what in the world? And he told Jeff, and it stuck with me. He was like, I don't know what her purpose is in this life. He was like, but it's your job to help her figure it out. He was like, she's here for a reason.
Right.
And I've kind of spent the last 6 years trying to figure out the reason.
Yeah.
I've often thought about, do I write a book? Like, is that how I express this? How do I do that?
Yeah.
And then life just kind of happens. And I think that I've realized if writing a book is what I'm supposed to do, I'll do it.
Right.
I ask often and kind of urgently sometimes of God to tell me what I'm supposed to do. But if we're being honest, I've asked it with reservation, like, because I'm almost a little bit scared of what he'll ask me to do with it, because it's such a big story.
Yeah.
But I also think maybe in this chapter of my life, it's just raising my girls.
I was thinking, I wonder if it's almost living out the miracle.
Yeah.
Living and being like, this is my miracle baby who is in kindergarten and who can run around and play with friends and talk. And here I am, able to be a mom of two, watching my girls be raised. It's almost like just living out the miracle.
Yeah.
And then continuing to give it to God and glorify Him through it.
Yeah, I do. And
yes.
And there have been things that have changed. I mean, you don't realize until you really look back what all has changed. Yeah. Friendships have changed. Yeah. How I perceive people, their needs, their feelings. I mean, I would even say before all of this, I'm naturally like a compassionate and empathetic person, but I'm also somebody who is a little bit, I'm not going to say rigid because that's not the right word, but I can be a little guarded.
Right.
I can be a little guarded, and that sometimes can have a negative connotation with it, especially if people don't know you.
Right.
And so I think I have learned to be a little more just like open and outwardly compassionate instead of inwardly compassionate towards people. Yeah. I also think that on the flip side of that, have set, I don't want to call them boundaries, but been a little bit more reserved with the things that I say.
Yeah.
Actions. Yeah. I'm much more aware. I would say that my conscience is probably about 50 times stronger. Yeah. I think my intuition is too. Yeah. Those are things that have changed. Staying focused on what's really important. I don't let things that are small, at least I try not to. I'm not going to say it always happens. Right. I mean, we are human. But small things that happen, I really just think, God, this is so insignificant. Right. God,
because
this is.
You've had the worst situation.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, what's the worst situation? Oh, well, your heart stopped beating. Oh, well, I did. And I'm here now.
Yeah.
So like, this actually doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it doesn't sometimes rattle you or it doesn't sometimes affect you. The one thing that I personally have had to work through, and so I can't, I have several friends who struggle with fertility and struggle with, even being able to bring one child into the world. I have been blessed with two super healthy, funny, like the best children in the world. I'm partial because they're mine.
They are good.
But the struggle that I've had is I had to relinquish control because I was told after marriage I couldn't have any more children. And that was not the desire of my heart. I wanted to have more kids. Right. And so working through that, and that kind of devil getting after you peeks its head at really honestly the most inopportune times, but it happens. And so I'm not saying that there's not battles that have come out of this and not things that we've had to face. You know, I wanted more kids, and I try not to say it out loud, especially to, you know, my friends that have children, but I internally worry the entire time because I know what my experience was. And quite honestly, if I had known going in that it would still give me merit, I'd walk into the fire 100 times. Right. But I don't want anybody else to have to go to walk in the fire. So I'm not saying that it doesn't come with its challenges. It doesn't come with guilt. I'm a part of several different groups through AFE, through the Amniotic Fluid Embolus Foundation. There's a foundation because they are really trying to get to the bottom of why. The why. Is it preventable? Is there things that we could be doing? Right. But you know, I hear stories more often than not of moms and children not surviving, or children not surviving a mom, or child surviving a mom not, or neither one. Like, and there's a little bit of survivor's guilt that comes with that. Like, I should be doing more. I should, you know, there's a little bit of a push that I have in myself. That probably comes from a competitive spirit. Like, I need to be doing more with this. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? But quite honestly, I think just probably the first step was even just telling it.
Yes. Well, thank you for doing that here. That's so cool. And then one more little point back was just when Jeff, her husband, was in the waiting room, you know, thinking, you know, he has a baby at home. He has a girl at home. Libby's at home, but I'm about to lose two of my other girls. You know, just that fear of that. But then being prayed over and prayed over and prayed over. And just as they said, Deuteronomy 31.
31:8. Mm-hmm.
What is that one?
Look, you look, and you would think that I would know it by heart, but it's the Lord himself goes before you. He will be with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, is what Bert said.
And then the doctor comes in and says she's awake. You know, so you find out like your wife's heart's not really beating. This is not really looking good. Praying out to God. What else are you supposed to do in this situation? And then it's like, wait, she woke up. Yeah. Just that, I can't even describe it. Just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of takes your breath away a little bit. And not to say that moment was like, oh my gosh, she's going to be fine. I mean, there was several there was like a huge hope that was given because we went from she's not going to be here to we've got, you know, let's make it through these next 24 hours. Right. Let's make it through these next 24. And just all the people that I met along the way, I've gotten some pretty wonderful friendships out of that. And quite honestly, those are some of the people that I can talk to the deepest about it because they were there. I understand it. And it's hard not being in the medical profession to understand like the gravity of what all happened. And so it's hard to talk and say it without understanding. And they're people that understand. But I met some pretty incredible people.
And the trauma that comes with it, like you were saying, like this is a traumatic experience. And then learning with that, but then this. And I think this is it was an encouragement to me to hear the miracle story of it because I feel like we often hear of the not miracle situation or what we think is not the miracle. Yeah. And we hear about, yes, God raised Lazarus a long time ago and God healed this person and that woman touched Jesus' cloak and she was saved or healed. Yeah. You think it's in the past and that was only in the Bible days.
Yeah, no.
But God didn't stop working then. God's still working now. And so I think it is really good for people to hear stories like yours that you and your baby are here. Yeah. And the miracle stories of how God worked in your lives to keep you here for a purpose to raise your girls. You know? And because sometimes, yes, God is still good when the miracle doesn't work out. Like literally last week's
when it's not what we ask.
That's literally what last week's episode was. When the miracle you're asking for, and it looks like someone else got it, or it looks like it didn't answer in your way. But it's also good for us to hear stories where God granted those prayers and God protected and healed that way. So too. So I really do appreciate you telling your story.
No, you're welcome.
And last thing is, it's your story and it's Merritt's story, but most of all, it's God's story. Mm-hmm. And it's just so cool to see as Christians how He does that. And it's so your story, it's so her story, but most of all, most importantly, it's God's story and how y'all are living that out in your lives.
Absolutely. He definitely went before us. That is for sure.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also the verse was like perfectly lined up with.
Yeah.
This
Yeah. Do not be afraid. And buddy, he won't. Yeah.
No.
He took that away.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
That's so cool. Well, thank you.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for listening. I hope y'all were also encouraged by this story just to see how God works in crazy ways. So we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.